Yes, we can
Yes.
start.
Okay, you 1, 2, 3 and put it online.
All right. Amit and all, are we, can we start now?
Yes, ma'am.
Satish,
Yes, ma'am. We can start now.
Satish, we can start?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, so you put all of us, all the webcams and all have to go off. Only Dr. Ashwat Kumar or Dr. Alpesh.
Wait for 1 minute. Wait for 1 minute. Alpesh sir, let him come back. Just 1 minute. I will be closing the door and coming. And Alpesh sir comes. We will start. Alpesh sir comes.
So as soon as Alpesh sir comes now, so we all will start. I'll just give the back count and then you put the main panel in the screen. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Satish, you are there now?
Yes, I'm here, ma'am.
Okay, so you will handle the entire thing. So I'll just give the count and I'll move out of it.
Yes.
Okay.
Sir. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, he's come. Sir has come, I think.
Yes.
So we'll start.
Okay, sir has come.
Yeah. All right. All right. So at the count of 3, 2, 1, let's start.
Very good afternoon to all of you. First of all, I must congratulate all the postgraduate students for the wonderful work they are doing and for their great academics and for their services to the mankind. In the Lucknow AICOG conference during installation ceremony, during my presidential speech, we have declared that this year we will start postgraduate forum for our FOXY. In FOXY, we have like ICOG, that is academic wing of FOXY. Similarly, we wanted to start one forum where we can directly interact with our postgraduate students across the India. Our main aim is to provide a common platform to all the postgraduate students, because colleges are doing very good work, great work. All our teachers are doing great work. All of you are at your level also doing very good work. What we feel is, as a FOXY, we can provide you a common platform where you all can know each other, where you all can interact with each other. Our aim is also to promote brotherhood, also to promote respectful residency. We also wanted for overall growth of our postgraduate students, because we also see all of you as a future FOXians, future gynecologist. So grooming as future gynecologist, which are the other future scopes. We also wanted to make all of you aware of all these things. The theme for this year is safety first for Indian women and FOXians. So when we selected this theme, in FOXians, we also considered our members as well as our postgraduate students, our staff and our family members. So your safety is prime concern for all of us. Nowadays across India, you all must be knowing there are some incidences where violence against our postgraduate students happened. So our ultimate aim is to bring unity among all the postgraduate students across India. And this is possible only when you all are on one platform, when you know each other, when you can communicate with each other, when you can interact with each other, when you can discuss your problems, and when you can find your solution, and when you can stand along with each other. And that is why the purpose of this PG forum is this. So basically, we are not interested much this PG forum. We are interested in academics, but PG forum is not only for academics, because colleges are doing excellent work. So we do not have to worry for this academic part, but we wanted overall growth where safety is also there, where grooming is also there, where brotherhood is also there, where respectful postgraduate residency is there. So there are so many other things for which we wanted to create this forum. I am happy to inform you that we have five very active coordinators for this postgraduate PG forum. They all have done excellent work, and because of all, now we have data of nearly more than 1500 postgraduate students across India, and within a month we it's our vision to have more than 2500, or even we can reach to 3000 postgraduate students across India. So once we have the strength, we can make other plans also for all the postgraduate students. Today, a respectful, eminent faculty, Madam, is with all of us. We all know Dr. Madam Serena Gilwas, and I just told her that, Madam, you are Sachin Tendulkar for all of us. So this is the first program, and we hope that we will have more such programs. We will meet with all of you very frequently, and I may come to you, I may not come to you, but my coordinators, Dr. Aswath, Dr. Sunil, Dr. Rohan Palsetkar, Saswat Jani, Dr. Niharika Malhotra, and Dr. Charmila will be in contact with all of you. For any query, for any problem, please feel free to communicate with me directly at any time. With this brief opening remarks, once again, I welcome all of you. And with this, I hand over mic to Dr. Sunil Sir.
Dr. Sunil is a joint secretary of FOXI, and he is also he is the right hand of Alpesh sir. So even this PG forum, which sir has created, idea and created, all the work behind, we have just sent all the names of the PGs all over India to Dr. Sunil, and he is the person who grouped it and everything, and so much hard work, not only for the PG forum, he is doing for FOXI. I am very happy to welcome Dr. Sunil Shah to this program and to address you. Dr. Sunil, you can address the gathering.
Thank you very much, dear Dr. Asad Kumar, for a wonderful introduction. And all this is because of our dynamic president, respected Dr. Alpesh Gandhi sir. On the outset, I would like to thanks again Dr. Alpesh Gandhi, my dear friend Dr. Aswath, also team Alembic, and Madam Serena Gilwas. Also, I would like to thanks Alembic for organizing this wonderful webinar for our beloved PG students. I also bring greetings from Ahmedabad to all the PG students across the India, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari and from Gujarat to Assam, right? So thank you very much. And you can see a wonderful thought of our president, Dr. Alpesh Gandhi. Wonderful way he has put all these ideas across the India for the PG students. And the way he is executing everything, it's so wonderful that it will, on a long run, will help to all our PGs. I will not take much time. And now I will request dear Aswath Kumar to introduce our speaker, Madam Dr. Serena Gilwais, and ask her to take her presentation. Thank you.
I am very happy that Alpesh sir has started. There are so many webinars going on, and sir has vision for the postgraduate. This year, FOXI, it was FOXI's vision. Till now, not a single FOXI president has taken so much keen interest for the postgraduates, their programs, their academics, everything. We just used to have conferences where postgraduates can attend. That was what, and now it is everything special. All this, we have Dr. Serena Gilwas. She is the HOD and professor of Jubilee Mission Medical College. I don't think any postgraduate who is joined gynecology within 1 year, they will know the name.
Start this new venture of Foxy, specially dedicated to postgraduate students all over the country and masterminded by our president, Dr. Alpesh Gandhi. I welcome you all to this session on preterm labor and preterm pre-labor rupture of membranes. Now we'll have this presentation on the screen.
Madam, slide share, please. You will
Yes.
have to share
Yeah,
the
yeah.
screen. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that. Now, preterm birth is one of the commonest problems of pregnancy, and its incidence has not changed through several years in spite of research and considerable advances in obstetric care. But the perinatal mortality and the morbidity has improved due to better intrapartum care and due to better NICU facilities. Now, today we'll be talking on preterm labor, and I will start from the scratch for the sake of our postgraduate students. Prematurity is the most and the commonest major contributing factor of neonatal morbidity and mortality in India. And let me tell you something, in spite of all the advances, if you take the maximum number of neonatal admissions, it is prematurity, even today. Now, how do you define preterm labor? It is the onset of uterine contractions, which are painful and associated with cervical changes between 20 and 37. Now, we are very sure about the 37, that is the 36 plus 6. But the 20 is taken as a period of viability. Okay? Now, how should the contractions be? You should get at least about 4 contractions in 20 minutes or 8 in 60 minutes, plus cervical dilatation more than 3 centimeters or a cervical length, that is effacement, of less than 20 millimeters or 2 centimeters. And this should be assessed on a transvaginal scan. Every word of what I said is important. Up to the 37 weeks, the contractions 4 in 20, 8 in 60 minutes, and the cervical dilatation of 3 centimeters, but the effacement is only less than 20 millimeters length. Now, when you take the incidence, it's 5 to 10% globally, but approximately 20% in India. Now, after one preterm birth, the next preterm birth incidence is as high as 50 to 30%. After 2, it is nearly 60%. And after 3, it is nearly 75%. So the commonest cause of a preterm birth is a previous preterm birth. Now, when you take gestation-wise, the CDC has said, remember 34, okay? Anything above 34 up to 37, that is 36 plus 6, is actually the late preterm. And 70% of our preterm fall under this big chunk. The early preterm is between 32 and 34. That's only about 2 weeks, okay? Early preterm. But the very, when you use the word very, it is between 28 and 32 weeks. And the extreme preterm is less than 28. I want all of you all to remember this, because actually the prognosis for the baby depends upon whether it is extreme, whether it is very, or it's early or late preterm. But according to birth weight, we normally say the extreme low birth weight is 1000 grams, okay? 1000 grams and less. When you say very low birth weight, it is between 1000 and 1500. And when you say low birth weight, it is less than 1250 grams. Now, what are the factors? Let me tell you something. Everything is a cause for preterm labor. Remember that, and you're right. First, I told you a previous preterm birth is the commonest cause. Recurrent episodes of first trimester and second trimester bleeding where they may go into preterm labor. Overdistension of the uterus due to multiple pregnancy. Due to multiple pregnancy and polyhydramnios. Any placental problems like abruptio placenta and placenta previa can predispose to a preterm pain. Any previous miscarriages, spontaneous or induced, and fetal factors like fetal growth restriction, congenital anomalies. Now, infections in any form, okay? Remember, it could be an asymptomatic bacteria, or it could be a urinary tract infection and pyelonephritis. It could be any genital tract infections. It could be a chorioamnionitis being the most important cause, malaria. It could be a peritonitis, or it could be a positive, Vidal positive with very high spiking fever. All these infections in the body can predispose to a preterm labor. Okay, so infections is a very, very important cause, and we normally talk about the urosepsis in the form of urinary tract and pyelonephritis. Now, what about lifestyle modifications? Lifestyle modification, you find underweight and obesity, inadequate weight gain, okay, smoking, whether you're a passive or an active smoker, maternal age less than 17, she's more prone, and if she's more than 35, she's more prone. Low socioeconomic status, a chronic stress, anxiety, depression in the people. People who work for more than 8 hours per day, 40 hours per week, meaning 8 into 5, 40 hours. If it is more than that, she's more prone for a premature labor. Heavy exercise, when you take more than 20 pounds, lifting of heavy weights, it's not recommended. People who do regular night shifts, and of course, as I said, asymptomatic bacteria. But would you advise bed rest? No. The reason being, there is loss of trabecular bone on prolonged bed rest. There's increased incidence of venous thrombosis, risk of musculoskeletal dysfunction, and psychological strain on the patient. When I say musculoskeletal, I remember once we had a patient, she was on 6 months bed rest. In the end of 6 months, she couldn't even stand up straight. So she said severe osteopenia, she said a lot of muscular dystrophy. So please remember, bed rest is not the answer. Now, uterine and cervical factors, biconvate, uniconvate, and septic uterus. You have about 20 to 30% of them going in for a preterm labor, and prior cervical surgeries. So basically, when you look at the causes, spontaneous and unexplained preterm labor with intact membranes, okay, that is 40 to 50%. Idiopathic preterm pre-labor rupture of membranes, 20 to 30%. That we both know, okay. But the iatrogenic, which is what we induce for maternal or fetal indications, forms 1/3, about 20 to 30%. And twins, of course, a higher order pregnancies, you find that it's a high. So basically, there are 4 main causes. Okay. What is the symptom of a patient? See, when you know the menstrual pain, that is what they perceive. It's a menstrual cramp-like symptoms. They have pelvic pressure, low backache, pressure sensation in the vagina, vaginal discharge. And it could be irregular uterine contractions. So any of these symptoms she can come for. She need not specifically say she's got uterine contractions and pain. It could be any of these vague symptoms. Now, I want you all to remember these 2 words, interventions to prevent. It is not treatment, but prevention of preterm labor just by these 2, progestrogens and the cervical cerclage. If somebody is to ask you exactly how much does a progesterone prevent, 30%. It reduces the chance of next preterm labor. Now, where do we use? I'll make it very simple for you all. The ACOG and the Society for Maternal Fetal Foundation has said that a history of a prior preterm birth is an indication for you to start progestrogens. And when you see an ultrasound diagnosis of a short cervix. But I will tell you about the short cervix a little later. So these 2 are the main important causes, okay? Now, when you give the injectables, it is 17-hydroxyprogesterone caprate. It is a synthetic progesterone. FDA for the prevention of recurrent preterm births. And how do you give it? 250 milligrams intramuscularly from the 16th to the 36th week. And this has also been endorsed by the SMFM. Okay, so you can give it if she has had a previous history of preterm birth. This is the patient you start on 17-hydroxyprogesterone caprate from the 16th to the 36th week, weekly 250 milligrams. Okay, not anything. Now, the SMFM, as all, that is the Society for Maternal Fetal Foundation, has also said that you can give vaginal progestrogens if the cervix is short. And what is the dose? It is 200 milligrams vaginally daily. Okay, I'll tell you more about this. Normally, we never check a routine scan to do a cervical assessment. Please remember that. If you're asked at the exams, will you routinely do a scan and check? No. But there are about 4 or 5 indications we will ask for the to check the cervix. One is when there's a history of a prior preterm birth. or she's had a previous history of a cervical surgery, or she said recurrent bleeding in the first and second trimester, or as I said some time back, a uterine anomaly, or a pregnancy after an ART. These are few conditions we do check regularly, and that is normally done at the time of the anomaly scan. Okay, in an anomaly scan, you check the cervix. And if at that time you find that the cervix is short, you will have to start her on vaginal progestogen, the natural progestogen, 200 milligrams vaginal. Now we know of this great Optimum trial. It was a multicentric randomized double-blinded study for vaginal progestogen for preterm labor. They gave vaginal progestrogens between 24 and 34 weeks. They looked at the primary outcomes of fetal death, birth before 34 weeks, composite of death, brain injury, and bronchopulmonary dysplasia, and standardized cognitive score at 2 years of age. And what did they find? It did not help. It did not help. The interpretation was in the Optimum study, the vaginal progestrogen was not associated with the low risk of preterm labor or composite neonatal adverse outcome to children at 2 years of age. But the advantage was vaginal progesterone had no long-term benefit or harm. Okay. So in spite of that, the American College says the 2017 guidelines tells us that if you've got a short cervix and if you think you have to give something, give a vaginal progestrogen. So I've told you only 2 indications for progestrogens. Past history of preterm labor, you can give injectables from 16 to 36 weeks. If you've got a short cervix, we will talk more about the short cervix later. If you've got a short cervix, then you give a vaginal progestrogen, 200 milligrams. Now, when you look at a cervical cerclage, do you put a cervical cerclage for all? There are 3 important indications. One is history indicated cervical cerclage. It is, there's a previous history of a mid-trimestral loss and you find that she requires a cervical cerclage, okay? That all of us know. But what I want to add to this point is when you've got a previous history of a second trimester or repeated second trimester losses, you must put an early cerclage. And when do we put a cerclage? We always put between 12-14 weeks to start with, up to 23-24 weeks. Beyond that, we don't do it. Okay. So in this, when the history indicated, we put it soon after the first trimester. So when you've done a 11 to 14 week scan, around that time, we put the cerclage. It is second is an ultrasound indicated. Now I'll tell you sometime back later on that a short cervix can be picked up by a transvaginal ultrasound. Very important. It could be the dilatation, it could be funneling, it could be a short cervix in the length, everything. All that is what you detect on ultrasound, and that is an indication for you. When you see that, you put it. Whenever you see it, as I told you, between 13 and 23 weeks, you do it. But what is physical examination indicated? You put a speculum. Physically, you're putting in a speculum. And then if you see a bulging bag, that is a rescue cerclage or the physical examination indicated cerclage. Now, look at this. The ACOG has recommended cervical cerclage in singleton pregnancies with a prior preterm labor less than 34 weeks if now the cervical length is less than 25 millimeters at less than 24 weeks of pregnancy. Very, very important for you to remember. And when do I say it's a short cervix? Less than 25 millimeters or 2.5 centimeters, less than 24 weeks of gestation is what is called a short cervix on ultrasound. Okay. And when this associated with a preterm labor, now already I was giving her injectable progestrogens, this patient also requires a cerclage. Have I made myself clear? Now, what is emergency? Now, this is one criteria. I told you that normally we put a cerclage between 13 and 23 weeks. Here is one condition. You can put it as far as 28 weeks of gestation. It is accepted that you consider women for a rescue cerclage. Supposing she comes at 28 weeks with a bulging bag of membranes, unruptured and exposed fetal membranes. And if, because always the failure is more if the cervix is more than 4 centimeters dilated. And I must tell you one more thing about this bulging bag of membranes. As long as the bulge of the membranes remains within the cervical canal, then the success is good. But once it is prolapsed into the vagina where it is exposed to the vaginal flora, the success is less. Okay? So a rescue cerclage can be put as far as 28 weeks. What are the contraindications? Of course, chorioamnionitis. What is chorioamnionitis? We pick up chorioamnionitis when you feel the mother has got fever, she's got leukocytosis, maternal tachycardia, she's got tenderness of the abdomen and a foul smelling discharge. That is chorioamnionitis, okay? So if she's got any of those features, don't put a cerclage. She has ruptured her membranes, don't put. She's got an intrauterine death or an anomalous fetus or a compromised fetus, don't put a cerclage. She's in active labor and she's got bleeding or leaking, don't put. Now, these are the contraindications for any cerclage, however precious the baby. Okay. Now, this is what I wanted to tell you. You saw this is the physical examination. When I put a speculum, physical examination has revealed a bulging bag of membranes, and the ultrasound on my right side shows that it is a U-shaped funneling. Now, what is the treatment? When a patient, I told you the symptoms of the patient, I told you the two prevention, which is progestrogens and the cerclage, and how can you treat a patient? I told you initially the treatment, you remember, I said it is between, you got uterine contractions 4 in 20 minutes or 8 in 1 hour, plus cervical dilatation of 3 centimeters and effacement less than 2 centimeters or 20 millimeters. Okay, she's an established preterm labor. Then the first and foremost thing that I do is I have to do an initial assessment. I must assess the patient first as soon as she comes. Okay, you assess her. Now, there are 3 things we will be talking about: antenatal corticosteroids, tocolytics, and magnesium sulfate. Tocolytics for only about 48 hours is required, and magnesium sulfate for neuroprotection. And please remember, it is before 32 weeks. After 32 weeks, there is no place for magnesium sulfate for neuroprotection. Is there a place for antibiotics? No. In the management of acute preterm labor, no antibiotics. Will you give a progesterone supplementation? No role in the management of acute preterm labor. But if she's already has been on progestrogens, you continue it. So let's talk more about the steroids. So we'll talk about 3 important aspects. Do we give her steroids? Do we give her tocolytics? What do we give her, and how do we give the magnesium sulfate? On admission, you'll find that review the patient's history, accurate assessment of gestational age based on the ultrasound. First, that history is very important. Evaluate her symptoms. Remember the symptoms and signs I told you? Check her vitals. Then do an electronic fetal monitoring. Very important. That is the best way for us to assess the status of the baby. Check out for the uterine contractions, frequency, duration, intensity, etc. Assess the abdomen and see how big is the baby. If she delivers, will she be salvageable, etc. And then we do a speculum examination. Now see what all you can make out on a speculum. You can make out cervical dilatation. You saw the physical examination, I showed you the dilatation of the cervix. You can see that. You can see the presence of uterine bleeding. The bleeding comes through the os, it's a uterine bleeding. If the leaking is coming through the os, she's leaking. And if she's got the cervicovaginal fluid, you can take it for a culture. And how do you take it for a culture? You at 10 seconds, you just twirl it around for 10 seconds. Now this is all that is required. But if you have to do a PV, you can do a PV on a preterm labor. Not so for a preterm rupture of membranes, okay? But in a preterm labor, you can do, but remember to use the word gentle, a gentle PV, okay? Then we do a transvaginal ultrasound. I told you a cervical assessment is only on a transvaginal ultrasound. Then you check the ultrasound, fetal presentation, amniotic fluid index, etc. Placental, any abnormalities, maternal, anatomical abnormalities of the uterus. What are the investigations? As a postgraduate, you're expected to say this. Rectovaginal GBS, that is a group B streptococcus culture. You should say that, okay? I'll tell you more about it later. You must send the uterine micro and culture for asymptomatic bacteria, because only a culture will pick up the asymptomatic. Ultrasound for the cervical assessment, okay? And fetal fibronectin. I'll tell you quite something about fetal fibronectin. The ACOG has said less than 34 weeks, a fetal fibronectin of more than 15 nanogram per ml results in an increased risk of preterm birth within the next 7 days. So it has got more of a negative predictive value than a positive. You know what the meaning of that is? If there is no fetal fibronectin, unlikely for it to get into labor the next 7 days. That is important. It is more a negative predictive value. Now, what do you know about fetal fibronectin? It's a glycoprotein seen at the interface of the chorion and the decidua. Whenever I say membranes, I mean the chorion and the amnion and the relationship between that and the decidua. It is actually a kind of glue which helps in the adhesion. So when the membrane separates itself, you will find that fibronectin is seen in the cervicovaginal secretions. The sample should not be contaminated by amniotic fluid, and maternal blood should be also avoided. So 2 things you should not have is an amniotic fluid or a maternal blood. Remember, fetal fibronectin is not a screening test. You cannot do that to screen a patient. Very important. You do not do a fetal fibronectin in established preterm labor. Now, you all know the definition better than me. Dilatation more than 3 centimeters and length less than 20 millimeters. If she's already in preterm labor, don't check the fetal fibronectin. You just start the treatment. But then where is the place of fetal fibronectin? It is done in the presence of uterine contractions before 34 weeks, when the length is between 20 and 30 millimeters or between 2 and 3 centimeters on a transvaginal. So only when in doubt, you do the fetal fibronectin. Have you got that? So it's not a screening test. It is not done when you're sure about the preterm labor because of the dilatation effacement, but you will do that only when the effacement is between 20 and 30, and I'm not so sure. Then you can do the fetal fibronectin. Now, this is the best combination of fetal fibronectin testing and the cervical length in a symptomatic woman increases the predictive value. Okay, so that's very important. The two important testing is fetal fibronectin and CL. Now, I told you some time back, I do not measure the cervical length as a routine in every patient, but if she's got a previous history of a preterm birth, yes, I do, and I will check every time she comes to me. If she's got a previous history of a cervical surgery, I will check. Repeatedly, this whole first and second trimester, she's been having recurrent bouts of bleed. Maybe the cervix is dilating. That's why she was having little bouts of bleed. Uterine anomalies, I told you, because of the 20 to 30% increase in cervical insufficiency there, and a pregnancy after ART, which is very, very precious. Okay, these are the only indications where we routinely check for cervical length. Routine use of the cervical length screening in a low-risk population with a singleton pregnancy is not recommended. And when will you check the cervical length? It is between, I told you before, 24 weeks, less than 25 millimeters. Okay, there's an increased incidence of spontaneous preterm labor. Now, how do you check? You look at how do you check the cervix? Okay, it should be done with the bladder empty transvaginal ultrasound. From the internal os to the external os is the total length. And if there is a funneling, you saw there's a little funneling there. If there is a little funneling, then beyond the funnel, you see the length of the cervix. Okay, so you see the length of the funnel, you see the length of the remaining cervix that's left. Now, the cervix is now measured from the internal os to the external os with an empty bladder. And if the internal os is open, the cervical length is measured from the tip of the funnel to the external os. Transvaginal ultrasound is safe, it's highly reproducible, and it is more sensitive than a transabdominal. The cervical length measurement is not recommended in a multiple pregnancy. Okay, it's not recommended. Now, you remember this acronym, trust your vaginal ultrasound. The T is when the os is closed. Your Y, there is a little funneling, but there is still residual length. V is when it is up to the external os, and U is when it's a U-shaped funneling. So then you know it's extremes. Now, this is what I say. Put as a clutch. So history indicated is done very early, ultrasound when you see it, and an emergency clutch as late as 28 weeks you can do. Anytime that you see the bulging bag. Now, steroids. Now, this every word is important. Okay, when the American College has said there are a course is 2 doses. Okay, that's a course of corticosteroids recommended between 24 and 34 weeks. All of us must remember that 24 and 34 weeks we give it when you're expecting delivery within the next 7 days. Okay, and the dose of betamethasone that you give is 12 milligrams, and it is intramuscularly. Studies have been done with the intramuscular. We do not recommend intravenous, because intravenous there is a sudden spike and a sudden fall. There is no sustained levels. So it should be given as 12 milligrams intramuscularly, 2 doses, and it is 24 hours apart. And the best time for you to have the delivery is another 24 hours after the last dose. Then the baby will get maximal. So you got this is very clear. Now, there is something more to it, a single rescue dose. This is otherwise called the salvage therapy. Now, this is a single dose. It's not a course, okay? It is recommended in women less than 34 weeks of gestation. That's one. Because we said it is between 24 and 34 weeks. When the initial course was given 14 days earlier, then you can give 1 more dose. Okay, that's 1. 2, when the initial course was given before 28 weeks of gestation, you can give 1 more dose. And when you're expecting the delivery within the next 7 days. This is the total sum of corticosteroids, which you all should know. Please remember, repeated courses of steroids are not advocated due to the increased risk of demyelination and cerebral palsy in the neonate. So keeping on giving steroids is very, very harmful for the baby to be born. So you should just give 1 course and be done with it. And now you might ask me the second question, whether you can give a after 34 weeks. I'll tell you that also. Okay. So now you know between 24 and 34 weeks, if the previous one was given 14 days prior, and if the previous one was given if it was given before 28 weeks, and you're expecting delivery within the next 7 days. give betamethasone and dexa, yes, they both have got the same efficacy. But please remember, betamethasone is a much more studied drug. Dexa is equally potent, can be given. It is 4 doses, 6 milligrams intramuscularly, but it is 12th hourly. Okay, there it was 24 hours. Now, will you give it after 34 weeks? That was my question to you all, right? It may be considered between 34 and 37 weeks if at risk of preterm birth within the 7 days. You can give another dose. If she is not, if you're expecting delivery within the next 7 days, okay? And if she has not received a previous course, that has been cut off by that, she has not received a previous course, you can give. But this isn't practiced universally because what does it do after this? It actually produces only a reduction in transient tachypnea of the newborn, which is a very short-acting, self-limiting condition with a very good prognosis. So why do you want to subject your baby when you don't want to give an unnecessary drug? But please remember, steroids have also got some other effects. It also reduces intraventricular hemorrhage, necrotizing enterocolitis, etc. But after 34 weeks, it is not for lung maturity, but it is for the other reasons that you give it. So as I said, it reduces the incidence of RDS, reduces the mortality of the fetus, reduces intraventricular hemorrhage and necrotizing enterocolitis. And I repeat, it is between 24 and 34 weeks. You already know what it is. Between 34 and 37 weeks, if you want, you can give it if she has not received it earlier. And tachypnea of the newborn. Now, at this point, I want to tell you what the RCOG says. RCOG says you can give for elective cesareans up to 39 weeks. Okay, you can give it, but that again is only to reduce the transient tachypnea of the newborn. So it's really not advocated. If not required, don't give it. Now, the second thing I told you, first was steroids, next is tocilizers. Now, when will you give? Do not recommend it before 24 weeks. Please do not give it before 24 weeks. Tocilizers, if they get pains, let them deliver. Okay, because there is a high incidence of, that is called the pre-viable. The 23-weeker is called the pre-viable fetus. Okay, I'm sorry, the peri-viable fetus. The upper gestational age limit is 34 weeks. Okay, now tocolytics. This I want to spend a little time. Today, the two most important effects of a tocolytic agent are, it is delay in delivery for at least 48 hours for two important things. One is for the steroids and one is to transport the mother to a safer tertiary care center for NICU facilities, for the neonatal facilities. And third point is, if you get a prolongation of pregnancy, it is an added point. Okay, so two important things are for the steroids and for transportation to a tertiary care center. But it might prolong the pregnancy, then it's a bonus for you. Okay. Now, what are the contraindications for a tocolysis? If it's an intrauterine demise, it's a lethal anomaly, or if it's a non-reassuring fetal status, don't give it. Don't give a tocolytic, let her deliver. If she's got preeclampsia, severe features of eclampsia, or if she's got an antepartum hemorrhage, like an abruptio, but she's hemodynamically unstable, please let her deliver. If she's got evidence of chorea and amnitis, don't give her a tocolytic. If she's got any maternal contraindications to the tocolytic agent, don't give it. So think well before you give a tocolytic. What are the 5 classes of tocolytic agents? You all know there's the calcium channel blockers, the NSAIDs or the the prostaglandins, the beta sympathomimetic drugs, the magnesium sulfate, nitric oxide donors, and the oxytocin receptor antagonists. Now I'll come to the first tocolytic, nifedipine. Nifedipine is the first choice. Whether it be ACOG, RCOG has given nifedipine this status. And how do you give it? You go to my first column. That is 30 milligrams. You give 30 milligrams orally, followed by 20 milligrams 8th hourly. You can give it for 48 to 72 hours with a maximum dose of 180, not more than 180 milligrams per day. And what is its side effect? It's hypotension, tachycardia, and headache. Many of them complain of headache. They can have a hypotension. You can combat this hypotension by giving her a preload, because it's a vasodilator, right? So you can give her a preload and then it reduces. And then you've got the tachycardia, right? Second is, the second tocolytic agent is magnesium sulfate. It was once recommended as one of the first choices by the ACOG, but now the American College has withdrawn magnesium sulfate as a tocolytic agent. Remember, the dosage is slightly higher than you should give for neuroprotection. It is 4 to 6 grams. It's not 4 grams, it's 4 to 6 grams over 20 minutes, followed by, instead of 1 gram per hour, it is 2 grams, slightly higher dose as a tocolytic. Remember, magnesium sulfate is secreted, it's excreted by the kidney, and you must put the urine out. You should do all same like your knee jerk, your respiration and urine output, everything should be checked if you're giving it. And remember, cardiac arrhythmias and hypocalcemia is a problem. The next important drug which is gaining a lot of importance is indomethacin. ACOG has given it the same status as nifedipine. Indomethacin, it should be given 50 milligrams orally to start with, loading dose, and 25 milligrams 4th hourly for 48 max 72 hours. You should not give it for more than 72 hours period. There is no question about it, okay? The second and most important thing is you will not give indomethacin if it is beyond 32 weeks, because beyond 32 weeks, its biggest problem is premature closure of the ductus. So please do not, the two important criteria, don't give it more than 40 to 72 hours, don't give it beyond 32 weeks of pregnancy. The nitric oxide donors, okay, that patch, it is really not very useful. The nitroglycerin, that is what it is, because headache, hypotension, not a very good drug. But the beta sympathomimetic drugs. Now, the beta sympathomimetic drugs, please remember two problems you've got to rule out is a cardiac problem and a thyroid disease, and severe anemia should be ruled out. And remember the side effects, look at the side effects column, it produces tachycardia, it produces tremors, hypotension, okay? And shortness of breath, pulmonary edema can happen due to fluid overload and because it increases the vascular permeability. And in a poorly controlled diabetic, it produces hyperglycemia and she can go for ketoacidosis. She can have a myocardial ischemia and hypokalemia, which can take you to arrhythmias in the patient. So it is, because of its side effects, it is actually not a very prominent drug, but many of us use it and it is a wonderful drug if you give it carefully. And I will tell you more about it shortly, okay? Now the next drug is oxytocin receptor antagonists, which is atosiban. Atosiban, it is, remember this is the dose all of you should know. The initial bolus dose is 6.7 milligrams over 1 minute, followed by, now next 48 hours, okay? The first 3 hours, you give 18 milligrams per hour for the first 3 hours. Then you reduce the dose to 6 milligrams per hour up to 45 hours, so 48 hours. You understand? So bolus dose is 6.7 milligrams over 1 minute, then 18 milligrams per hour for 3 hours, and then reduce the dose to 6 milligrams per hour infusion for up to 45. There are no side effects. That's the best advantage of this drug. Only little hypersensitivity has been noticed and little injection site reaction. But otherwise, it is a very good drug, but the US FDA has not approved it. But you will find that the RCOG has given it the second status after nifedipine. So ACOG has said nifedipine and indomethacin. RCOG has said nifedipine and atosiban. Okay, it is a good drug, but it is very expensive. Our women cannot afford it. Now we'll go one by one about nifedipine. It is the drug of choice. Remember, we don't like to take a combination of nifedipine and magnesium sulfate for tocolysis because it is a dangerous combination. It suppresses the muscular contractility because it blockades the neuromuscular axis, and thereby you can have reduction in respiration. You understand? So be careful when you give a combination. We do give it, but be careful. 30 milligrams loading dose, I told you, 20 milligrams 8th hourly for the 48 hours, and with the maximum dose of 180 milligrams per day. It is completely metabolized in the liver and excreted through the kidneys. But remember the two important contraindications for nifedipine. It is contraindicated in heart failure and those with the reduced ejection fraction. Okay, two absolute contraindications. Don't give it when the patient is in failure. Don't give it when the echo has shown a reduced ejection fraction. So you know about nifedipine. What do you know about indomethacin? I've already told you it is the second line of drug of choice for tocolysis after nifedipine, not later than 32 weeks because of premature closure of the ductus. It is a non-specific cyclooxygenase inhibitor. It can be given orally or rectally, no parenteral. The dosage is 50 milligrams loading dose followed by 25 milligrams 4th hourly. And I told you all some time back, 2 no's. Do not use indomethacin for more than 72 hours because of the concern of premature closure of the ductus and oligohydramnias, and also not recommended after 32 weeks as a side effects of fetal renal failure and oligo. I'll just tell you what it does. It reduces the fetal kidney blood supply, and it also increases the ADH. So it's an antidiuretic hormone for the fetus is increased, thereby less urine and less fluid in the mother. Do you understand? So these are the two conditions you'll have to think well before you, not more than 72 hours and not beyond 32 weeks indomethacin. But, this is what I told you, not to be given after 32 weeks. Remember, there are a few contraindications. This is as a postgraduate student, you all should know. Platelet dysfunction, we don't give it. Bleeding disorder, liver and renal dysfunction, gastrointestinal ulcerative disease, and in bronchial asthma, we don't give it, okay? Now, before you read it, you just listen to me for a minute. The beta adrenergic receptor antagonists are ritodrine, terbutaline, isoxapurin. Okay. Now, there are two types of beta receptors. There is a beta 1 receptor and a beta 2 receptor. The beta 1 receptors are seen in the heart. So when you give something which is just a beta, it will also stimulate the heart and you get tachycardia, okay? But when you give a beta 2 specific drug, what it does, it acts only on the uterus and relaxes the uterus. So then the side effects, cardiac side effects are less. Now you go back to your slide. Ritodrine was voluntarily withdrawn from the US market. It was the only drug earlier approved by the FDA, but now it has been withdrawn since 2003. It is, the ACOG now recommends terbutaline, that is the next drug. For two indications to give terbutaline, one is for uterine tachysystole and before an ECV, because we want acute tocolysis, okay? You're given her misoprostol and she's got severe tachysystole, then you can give her a shot of terbutaline subcute, that's fine. And before you start an ECV, you give her one shot of subcute, that's fine. So you can give 250 micrograms or 0.25 milligrams. The side effects are severe maternal hypertension, so you can't give it on a prolonged basis. It also produces, all these produces hypotension, tachycardia, and pulmonary edema, all the beta adrenergic receptors. And now, isoxapurin. Now, you don't think that it is a drug. In our poor scenario, we use it in our hospital. But what the ACOG has said is when nifedipine is ineffective, you can give isoxapurin. And how do you give it? We give it as a 40 milligram drip in 500 ml normal saline till the contraction cease. Slowly increase the rate till there is no contractions. But you should also see that if the pulse rate is more than 120, please stop your infusion. Please stop your infusion. First, if you want, you can reduce it a little and see. And if the pulse rate does not reduce to less than 120, please stop your infusion, then your complications are more. Then if you want, you can give it as 10 milligrams 8 hourly for 48 hours. We always talk today about tocolysis for 48 to 72 hours. Combination of tocolytics, please, should be avoided. Don't give two drugs. I give terbutaline and nifedipine. No, it's not done. Now, magnesium sulfate. Now, a few things about magnesium sulfate. It is less effective in preterm labor. It's prolonged use for more than 7 days. Now, see what happens when you give it for more than 7 days. Magnesium sulfate, we give it as a tocolysis. We give it for neuroprotection. We give it for eclampsia and all that. When you give it for more than 7 days, it can cause a bone thinning and fracture in the fetus due to low calcium levels. So we should not give, as soon as the need for magnesium sulfate is over, stop the drug, stop the drug. ACOG recommends magnesium sulfate up to 48,000 patients between 24 and 34 weeks for preterm labor. Now look at the contraindications. It is contraindicated in two important things. It's contraindicated in myasthenia gravis, and it is avoided in patients with myocardial compromise and cardiac conduction defects. Okay, you will have a problem if you've got a patient with myasthenia and you give it, or if you've got a so all the M's should be remembered. Magnesium sulfate, no, not to be given in myasthenia, not to be given in cardiac compromise, myocardial compromise. Nitric acid is ineffective and not superior. Is what I told you. Nitroglycerin not so effective. Okay. Now, atosuban, I already told you, the FDA has not given approval because of the concerns regarding efficacy and fetal newborn safety. It's expensive, though associated with fewer. That's the best thing about atosuban, very few side effects. And you all know the dose very well by now. It is 6.7 milligrams over 1 minute, 18 milligrams per hour for 3 hours, and then 6 milligrams per hour for the next 48 hours. Now, magnesium sulfate for neuroprotection. It is most effective for neuroprotection between 24 and 32 weeks. What does it do? It is indicated when delivery is expected within the next 24 hours. So when you know that your patient is getting to labor and she's going to deliver and she's less than 32 weeks, give magnesium sulfate for neuroprotection. What does it do? It reduces the risk of cerebral palsy and severe motor dysfunction in the neonate. What is the dose? As I told you, 4 grams loading dose and 30 minutes followed by 1 gram. That loading dose is given over 30 minutes, and then give 1 gram per hour. You can give it for 24 hours or until delivery, whichever is sooner. Got that? Whichever is sooner. So max only for 24 hours to give it. It can be repeated when preterm labor occurs. That's another thing. Now, supposing you've given her this time and then she goes home and she comes back to you after 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and again she is showing evidence of threat, give again, give again. It can be repeated when preterm labor occurs for neuroprotection. And the best, the drug, tocolytic, along with magnesium sulfate, if you are asked, indomethacin is a drug of choice, not magnesium sulfate. As I told you, best avoid nifedipine and beta mimetic drugs along with magnesium sulfate to avoid serious side effects. Now, this is a very important slide, okay? The ineffective interventions. What is it that you will not do? No bed rest, right? I'm not able to use my cursor because it keeps changing. Second is antibiotic therapy. No, we don't give it to patients with intact membranes and preterm labor. We don't give it. Nutritional supplementation, hydration, sedation, no use. Cervical cerclage is not useful with even if she's got a prior preterm labor with the normal cervix. Only if the cervix is short, you will give a cervical cerclage for the same patient. With a short cervix in the present pregnancy with no history of preterm labor, we don't have to give it. Just seeing a short cervix, what will you do? We'll give a vaginal progestogens. Now you got that very clear? No role for cerclage in multiple pregnancy. We know that also. Progesterone supplementation. Women with acute preterm labor do not benefit from progesterone supplementation. Acute preterm labor, it's not the treatment. You can give it as a prophylaxis. I told you, injectables, if you just got a past history, you can give it. The home uterine monitoring device, no use. It does not improve the perinatal mortality. And cervical pessary, which is called the Arabin pessary, for short cervixes less than 25 millimeters. They say instead of putting a cerclage, can you put a pessary? As of today, it is only under research protocol, Arabin. Now, what will you do after she has been treated? Now, many times you don't know, should I keep her in the hospital? After you have treated her for 48 hours, 72 hours, or maybe 5 days, you've kept her in the hospital, she can go back home, go one by one. She can be managed as an outpatient. Will you recommend bed rest? No, but avoid sexual activity. Avoid sexual activity. Routine fetal fibronectin testing and home uterine activity is not useful after this, okay? Cervical pessary, as I told you, only in clinical trials. No maintenance tocolysis, no prophylactic antibiotics, no new initiation of progesterone supplement. If she's already on progesterone, continue it. So she can just go home and continue with her iron and calcium, okay? Now, labor management. Delivery is conducted in a tertiary care center with good neonatal facilities. Neonatal counseling is very, very important. Supposing you're delivering a 27-weeker, and she must know the cost she's going to incur by keeping the baby in the NICU, whether she can afford it. So neonatal counseling is very important. Continuous electronic fetal monitoring is preferred. Now, here I said no antibiotics, but I'll tell you something more of GBS later. If there is a suspicion of a GBS in a preterm, you will have to give, and the drug of choice for prevention of GBS is IV, that is penicillin, benzyl penicillin, or injectable ampicillin 2 grams, okay, and 1 gram every 4 hours. ACOG and the RCOG is recommended when you suspect or when she's got a positive group B streptococcus infection culture. Epidural analgesia can be given. Do not use scalp electrodes or fetal blood sampling for preterm babes less than 34 weeks. No routine episiotomies or forceps delivery to protect the fragile head. No routine. If you required, you give it. Okay. Vacuum is better avoided due to fear of intracranial hemorrhage. Preferred mode of delivery is a vaginal route. Consider cesarean only for obstetric indications. And studies have shown, this is a very important statement, I want everyone to listen to this. Studies have shown that there is no increased neonatal survival with cesarean section compared to vaginal delivery. So by doing a cesarean, are you increasing the survival? No. But is there a problem? Yes, do it. Do a cesarean, no problems. Now, this is another important thing you all should remember, the timing of cord clamping for a preterm. Wait for at least 30 seconds, but not longer than 3 minutes, okay? Now, we do something which is called the milking of cord. In fact, our hospital is doing a study on it. See, what is milking of the cord done for preterm? It is done 3 times in 30 seconds. 1, pull it down. 2, milk it down. 3rd, milk it down. A 10 centimeter long cord should be squeezed and clamped as soon as possible. Okay, take a 10 centimeter cord and squeeze it 3 times and then reapply the clamp. Keep the baby at or below the level of the placenta before clamping the cord. Delayed cord, how does it help? Or milking of the cord is associated with decreased need for blood transfusion, less chances of neonatal anemia, and lower chances of NEC and intraventricular hemorrhage in the newborn. Now I'll tell you a few words about preterm pre-labor rupture of membranes, or otherwise called premature rupture of membranes. That is totally different from a preterm labor management, okay? A preterm pre-labor rupture of membrane defines a spontaneous rupture of fetal membranes before 37 completed weeks and before the onset of labor, okay? The same time. It occurs in 3%, and these women have an increased risk of recurrence in a subsequent pregnancy. Preterm labor recurs, preterm premature rupture also recurs. Causes, there are so many causes, but intrauterine infections, very, very important. It could be oxidative stress, it could be premature cellular maturity, low socioeconomic status, low BMIs, nutritional deficiencies, cigarette smoking, antenatal bleed, etc., etc. What is the presenting symptom? Sudden gush of clear or pale colored yellow fluid, intermittent or constant. Some of them will say sometimes constantly leaking, madam, just little it's leaking, or I feel wet in the vagina or the perineum. Okay, this is normally the complaints. That means she started. Remember, a rupture is different from a leak. A leak can sometimes they can fuse and they can heal again. I told you some time back, when you say membranes, it is actually the chorion and the amnion. But when it ruptures, it's like a balloon bursting. Okay, that is rupture. Physical examination, two important things: direct observation of amniotic fluid coming out of the cervical canal and pooling in the posterior fornix, or any provocative maker of Valsalva maneuver. You can see like a leak through the cervical os. An examination of the cervix and vagina is done by sterile examination. No digital examination. Because if you want to conserve the pregnancy, if you have done a digital examination, then deliver her for whatever reason be it, as it increases the chance of intrauterine infection. And sometimes when you do a speculum, you will not only see the leak, but you might even see a fetal part or an umbilical cord seen through the canal. Then, of course, you'll have to deliver. Okay? Now, the laboratory tests, the nitrogen test, you all know the pH of the amniotic fluid is alkaline, whereas that of the vaginal pH is 4.5 acidic. So we have got commercial absorbent pads are also available as panty liners, and it will show the alkaline pH of the vagina. Another bedside test is take a drop and see for ferning. If you see ferning, then it is Leica. Okay? So two tests, look for the alkalinity of alkaline nature of the on the nitrogen paper, and look out for ferning. Both will be positive. Okay? Ultrasonic, this is the most important follow-up for patients who are conserved on amniotic fluid. Serial monitoring of the amniotic fluid is a very non-invasive test for confirming diagnosis of PPROM. Once a woman has ruptured her membranes, it appears that most clinicians prefer to hospitalize. I told you preterm, after that she can go back home, but once she has ruptured her membranes, and if you are conserving, because there are only two management, either expectant or it is a definitive management. Now the two modes, as I told you, immediate delivery or expectant management. Now the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecology have reiterated the importance that the most important factor for preterm labor management with ruptured membranes is the gestational age. If you think the gestational age is not much, then probably you should be delivering, decide on the delivery. Okay? Now, when the gestational age, this is three important things I want you all to remember. No expectant management if there is a non-reassuring fetus. No expectant management if there is definite evidence of chorioamnionitis, and no expectant management if it's an abruption. Three absolute contraindications. Then you will have to, you cannot conserve the pregnancy, you must deliver. So if you do a CTG and if you find it's a non-reassuring trace, please deliver the patient. If you see, as I told you some time back, the features of chorioamnionitis I told in the beginning of my lecture, if you see any of those, deliver the patient. If you see evidence of abruption, that means the liquor is all drained out, she's also started abrupting, then it is best that you deliver them. Three absolute contraindications. At this point of time, I'll tell you one more thing, three contraindications for expectant management. And when she has reached 34 weeks, not 37, when she has reached 34 weeks with ruptured membranes, then you must deliver the patient. That is the safest. You can do it at your own risk, but this would be the safest. So, but after 34 weeks, delivery is advocated for all women with ruptured membranes. This would be safe and a practical mode of management. The points to be borne in mind are: avoid a digital examination, and second, serial monitoring of amniotic fluid. Tocolysis, we don't normally give it for a preterm premature. If at all you give it only for your steroid activity. It is not very efficacious in a scenario of ruptured membranes with regard to neonatal outcome. In fact, it's associated with a high incidence of chorioamnionitis. So if they ask you, when will you give? I give a short course of tocolytics just to cover the steroids. Now, will you give steroids when there is a preterm? If there is no infection. This should be your answer to your examiner. Will you give steroids? No, ma'am. If there is infection, I will not give it. But if there is no infection, now I told you what all it is: the maternal fever, tachycardia, leukocytosis, tenderness, and foul smelling discharge. Okay. So also, will you retain the cerclage? I put a cerclage on her earlier. She has ruptured her membranes. If you have decided maybe after 24 hours, it is not very safe to keep it, you'd better remove it So also retaining cerclage after the membranes have ruptured for longer than 24 hours was associated with a high incidence of intrauterine infection, and it is weighed against it because of the adverse maternal and neonatal outcome. Because the mother can get infected, the fetus can also get infected. Okay, so fetuses born after ruptured membranes at 24 weeks and beyond have less incidence of lung hypoplasia. Now, this is another important thing I wanted to tell you all. See, 24 weeks is the cutoff for lung hypoplasia. We are always bothered, supposing there is a ruptured membrane, okay, and then you're going to conserve that pregnancy for a long time. Now, what happens is with less LICA, these are all the problems. She can have a lung hypoplasia, but it is less if the pregnancy is beyond 24 weeks. So what's the cutoff? 24 weeks for lung hypoplasia. Then what happens is due to less of LICA, the baby can develop contractures, facial dysmorphic features, and fetal growth restriction. That's actually, I'll tell you later on, that is called the tetrad of oligamenous. Okay. So when you do an very early pregnancy, for example, a 26-weeker, and you're trying to conserve, early expectant management also has a problem of oligohydramnios associated with what are the 4 things? Lung hypoplasia, fetal limb, and facial compression deformities and FGR. This is called the tetrad of oligohydramnios. The typical Potter syndrome also had agenesis of the kidneys. Okay, that's not there here. Okay, please remember that. Here in the scenario of oligohydramnios, it mimics a Potter syndrome by these facial and limb deformities. Another observation was the high incidence of umbilical cord prolapse in non-cephalic presentations, and you and I know it with PPROM, especially when it happened before the 24 weeks of gestation. Now, PPROM with twins, is it any different? No, it's the same as a singleton. Manage it in the same way as I told you all. Now, the few things to be remembered. Will you give, here you will give antimicrobials. Okay, I told you infection is the cause, and infection is the result of this also, and it can cause infection also. So whenever there's a PPROM and you're going to conserve, remember that you will have infection. So antimicrobial treatment is the most important thing here, whereas there in a preterm labor, it was given only to prevent a group B strep. Okay. So it reduced the incidence of chorioamnionitis, reduced neonatal sepsis, and by giving antibiotics, it prolonged the pregnancy. Now, how will you give it? It is a 7-day antibiotic regimen that is the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development has given this. And this I want all of you all to know. When the patient comes with you with ruptured membranes, you must give ampicillin 2 grams and erythromycin oral 250 milligrams 6th hourly over 48 hours you give it. If you don't want to give erythromycin, you can give azithromycin 1 gram orally. After that, for the next 5 days, you can give oral amoxicillin and erythromycin. Remember that first erythromycin, I said 250 milligrams, it is 6th hourly. The 333 is 8th hourly. Okay. So you got it. So the first you give IV ampicillin 2 grams plus erythromycin 6th hourly for 48 hours. And now you're going to, this is for the expected management. Okay, I'm going to conserve the pregnancy. In such a scenario, you can give oral amoxicillin and erythromycin. Now look at the small letters which I've written at the bottom. It is to be noted that erythromycin specifically had neonatal benefits. Please remember that. It helped not only to reduce the infection in the baby to be born later, but amoxicillin clavulanic acid regimen was associated with a high incidence of necrotizing NEC, necrotizing enterocolitis. So we don't, this is a plain amoxicillin I told you, not amoxicillin clavulanic acid. Okay, remember that. So you give IV ampicillin and you give erythromycin, you can give it 6th hourly. And after 48 hours, you change over to amoxicillin plus erythromycin 8th hourly in the rate of 250. Now I'm going to tell you 2 important trials. Okay, the Oracle trial. Now this, whenever we talk about PPROM and PR, there are 2 trials. Oracle 1 was done on patients who had ruptured membranes. The Oracle 2 trial was done with those who had intact membranes. See, it's ulta. Okay, the 1 was done with ruptured membranes and the 2 was done with intact membranes. So it is a very notable study. It's a 7-year follow-up of an Oracle trial. The full form of Oracle is Overview of the Role of Antibiotics in Curtailing Labor and Early Delivery Collaborative Group. Okay, I'll just tell you a few words about the Oracle trial. It was an RCT. It is, what do they do? It is a randomized controlled trial, the broad spectrum antibiotic for PPROM. It was done in 4,826 women. And what did they give? They had, it was a 4-limb study, children. See, it was 250 milligrams of erythromycin, 325 co-amoxicillin, clavulanic acid. Okay. Then they gave both. And then they gave also a placebo. So that was 4 limbs. Erythromycin in 1 limb, amoxicillin clavulanic acid in one limb. Both were given in one limb, and the fourth limb was a placebo. And they gave it for daily for about 10 days, and one went on up till delivery. And the primary outcome, yet, was a composite neonatal death and lungs versus major cerebral abnormality. Interpretation was that erythromycin for women with PPROM had a range of health benefits and probably a reduction in childhood disability. So erythromycin is very good. So much so, we give it in our institution for about 10 days in those we are doing expectant management with PPROM. We give erythromycin. We continue what I told you, 5 days, 7 days, we continue it for 10 days. But cloamoxicillin, we don't. Amoxiclav, we don't give it because of necrotizing. So this is a 4-limb of Oracle 1, which was ruptured membranes. What was Oracle 2? Oracle 2 was done with spontaneous preterm with intact membranes. This is what I told you, ulta. The first was ruptured and this was intact. Same antibiotics. One was erythromycin, one was amoxiclav, one was both, and one was a placebo. It's a 4-limb study, the same primary outcomes. And look at the interpretation with intact membranes. It provides evidence that antibiotics should not be routinely prescribed, should not be routinely prescribed for women with spontaneous preterm labor without evidence of clinical infection. So, group B strep infection. Now, this is one thing I want all, we all don't know much about it. And I want all of you all to know what is this group B strep. Okay, now this group B strep infection, when it occurs, the group B streptococcal infection is something which we see. There's a group A, okay? The group A is what you get throat infections, etc. The group B streptococcus is what can cause a genital infection. Now, how does the baby acquire it? As the baby passes through the vaginal canal, it aspirates this and the baby develops neonatal infection. Now, it is very severe infection, children. See, the early infection is within the first 24 hours, and that is immediate. I should not say early. The early is within the first 7 days. The baby can have, the immediate effect can be severe sepsis in the neonate. In the first 7 days, the baby can develop pneumonia and even meningitis. And beyond 7 days is the late effects of group B streptococcus infection. They can have neurodevelopmental delay, meningitis, etc., etc. So in order to prevent that, whenever the patient has ruptured membranes, we always give it. But will we give it in a preterm? Yes, you can give it if you have cultured group B strep, because it is a routine abroad that they always culture in a preterm labor. And I told you in my protocol, they do check for group B streptococcus infection before 37 weeks. Now, in our setup, if she has ruptured her membranes for 18 hours, even at term, we do give, don't we give? And when you stop this antibiotic, stop it as soon as delivery is over. It is only as long as the baby is inside. Or if the mother intrapartum has got fever, or there's a positive intrapartum NAT for group B streptococcus infection. Okay, right. The ones considered detrimental, we now advocate a single course of corticosteroids in patients with ruptured membranes. So we can give a course of corticosteroids. There is no contraindication as long as there is no chorioamnionitis. Magnesium sulfate is a neuroprotective agent. Yes, we do give it for everyone less than 32 weeks of pregnancy. Strongly recommended to reduce cerebral palsy and motor dysfunction. Then we also give antibiotics. So in PPRO, we give antibiotics. You know the regimen. You can continue it for up to 10 days after the Oracle 1 trial. Then we do give corticosteroids if there is no infection. We do give magnesium sulfate for neuroprotection if the pregnancy is less than 32 weeks. Tocolysis only for 48 hours to cover the steroids. Only to allow for administration of steroids. Tocolysis is not recommended for more than 48 hours and should not be given in women in advanced labor. Now, when do you deliver? I told you sometime back at the beginning of my talk that in a PPRO, once she has reached, maybe from 26 weeks or 28 weeks, you're looking after her. Once she has reached 34 weeks, I think that is enough. Deliver the patient that is safe. Okay. So when pregnancies have reached 34 weeks and beyond, it is best to terminate by induction of labor. The incidence of cesarean section is normally inversely proportional to the gestational age, meaning a 27-weeker may go in for a cesarean because there'll be a long induction delivery interval. So lesser the gestational age, more the cesarean rates. Cesarean is done only for obstetric indications. Prompt neonatal care being the most and the must irrespective of the mode of delivery, whether it's vaginal or abdominal. This is my last slide. Thus, PPROM should be managed on an individualized basis depending on the period of gestation and the NICU facilities. If you've got a good NICU, you can go ahead and deliver. It doesn't really matter. Give her the steroids, give her the magnesium sulfate and deliver. If you've reached 34 weeks, dangerous to continue. Okay. So with this, I conclude, dear friends. Thanking you And I'm ready to take on your questions.
Thank you, madam, for the excellent lecture. Now, as it's a PG lecture series, we will have 5 case scenarios, first by postgraduates, and then madam will take all the questions which are asked. So, I ask madam to continue with the case scenarios by the postgraduates. There are 5 of our postgraduates are there. One after the other, they will tell certain case scenarios and their answer to it. Then madam will make the final comment. So all the PGs, I request them to be brief so that we will be able to discuss in next 15 to 20 minutes. Okay, madam, you can start the slides. First slide. Okay.
Okay.
Just I will tell you.
Yeah. Sharon.
Sharanya? Dr. Sharanya? Sharanya? Take the next slide, madam.
No, it's okay.
Sharanya has come. Sharanya has come.
Yes.
Sharanya, put your video.
Yes, sir.
Sharanya, put your video and ask the question to madam.
Okay.
Okay. Sharanya,
Yes, sir.
talk loudly.
Yes.
Start.
Mrs. S, 26-year-old, primary, DCDA twin gestation, spontaneous conception at 30 weeks. Presenting complaint, she is presented with complaints of lower abdominal pain since morning. On examination, vitals are stable. Per abdomen uterus over distended, 36 weeks plus. Both fetal heart sounds heard. Multiple fetal parts felt. Contractions present, 5 contractions, each lasting 30-35 seconds in 20 minutes. Perspiculum showed no bleeding or leaking PV. Os open. Per vaginal examination, cervix is soft, mid position, 2 cm dilated, 2 cm effaced in length. Membranes plus, head -3 and pelvis normal. How will you manage this case?
Sharanya, you learn.
Sharanya, you can continue.
Yes, this is a case of multiple pregnancy with preterm labor. So first we have to hospitalize the patient and review of the patient's present obstetric history and medical history, including the risk factors for preterm birth, because preterm birth may be complicated or it may be triggered by obstetrical complications and medical or surgical factors, including
Sharanya, please close to the mobile or talk loudly.
This is a case of, sir, am I audible?
Yes.
Audible,
yes.
audible, loud, be loud.
This is a case of multiple pregnancy with preterm labor. First, we have to hospitalize the patient.
Okay. Okay. Then.
First, we have to hospitalize the patient, review of the patient's present obstetric history and medical history, including the risk factors for preterm birth. Because preterm birth may be triggered by obstetrical complications, example abruption, and medical or surgical factors, for example, appendicitis, cholecystitis, bowel obstruction, or strangulation. Periodontal infections and sexually transmitted infections should be ruled out. And next step is to assess gestational age from the first trimester scan, and most important is chorionicity, because chorionicity is the single most determinant of the outcome in twin pregnancies. And next is to evaluate the signs and symptoms of preterm labor, monitor maternal vitals, general and systemic examination should be done. In general examination, BMI is important. And next is pallor, pedal edema. In systemic examination, most important is the cardiovascular system and respiratory system, as we are giving tocolytics. Next is assessment of uterus for firmness, tenderness, fetal parts, position. And next we have to assess contractions, whether the contractions are increasing in intensity, frequency, duration. And next, do a perspiculum examination for any bleeding or leaking PV. That is to assess the fetal membrane status. Last, we will do a digital cervical examination. Before that, we need to confirm the placenta from the last scan before doing a digital cervical examination for cervical effacement and dilatation. CTG must be taken. CTG must be taken. Reassure the patient in between. Counsel the bystanders regarding the risk factors of or regarding the complications of prematurity. And ACOG recommends that the management of preterm birth in twins mirrors that of singletons. Therefore, antenatal steroids, a single course of antenatal steroids is indicated in all pregnancies between 24 to 34 weeks where delivery is thought to be imminent within the next 7 days. And to that effect, a 48-hour course of tocolytics can be given to allow corticosteroids to act. So calcium channel blockers and NSAIDs are advocated as the first-line agents.
Now, what
However,
will you give this patient? See, can you just see, Sharanya, this is what a mistake that most postgraduates make. Already, all what you've said is on the screen. Why do you repeat it? What will you do for this patient? Answer to the point. What will you do? First, you said you can assess the patient. All that you've already shown us. Now, what is the next thing that you do?
CTG
You'll
must
give
be
steroids. You said you'll give steroids. Okay, then.
steroids and then tocolytics. The
What
cardiac
tocolyte? Yeah, you give us one tick. You can't choose. You'll have to tell me what you'll give. What will you give?
and nifedipine can be given 30 milligrams stat followed by 20
Fine.
8 hours.
Now she's continuing to have pain. What else will you give? What else will you do?
If she's progressing, we can consider max self.
Very good. Then what else will you do?
Because
Will you do a NICU counseling? Will you do a NICU counseling?
inform the NICU.
Yeah.
Must be
Counseling should be done. Then?
And counsel the bystanders.
Yes.
And then care must be taken regarding excessive fluid administration because women carrying twins are at increased risk of pulmonary edema.
Okay.
So
Then?
care, watchfully we have to watch for signs of pulmonary edema carefully.
See, pulmonary edema, the incidence is a very small incidence, only 0.3%. So don't tell that as the most important. I have never seen it. Okay, so that is it's a very rare thing. So don't talk about. I just want you all to commit. In fact, I refuse to correct your presentations because I wanted to see what you all would commit. You understand? So we'll give this patient steroids. We will give this patient tocolytics. Anything else? You'll do magnesium sulfate. You said you'll do a NICU counseling. That's all that is required. That's all that is required. And if the patient's pain subsides, will you put a cerclage for this patient?
No. After 20 weeks, there is.
Yeah, very good.
After 20 weeks, there is.
She's crossed the period, and so we do not want to give. Okay, right.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Sharanya. So that's all that you need to do for this patient. Don't do anything more, and never repeat what has already been given to you all at exams. It's already been said. We know she has blood rupture. We know she has no hypertension. You understand? Right.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
We'll have the next question. Next question. Who's taking? Yeah, Ramya, you'll take the next question, Ramya.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, I can't see the slide.
Dr. Aswat, second case scenario, please.
Second case scenario. They're not able to see.
Okay. Here is the patient, Mrs. R, 26-year-old primary, married for 4 years, who is infertility treated, who is having regular antenatal checkup at our hospital, and she is at 23 weeks of gestation, presented with heaviness lower abdomen, and mild bloodstained discharge PV since early morning. There is no history of any leaking PV or fever, no history of dysuria or increased frequency of micturition, no history of gestational diabetes or hypertension. On examination, she is ephedrite with pulse rate of 80 per minute and BP of 110/80 millimeters of mercury. Systemic examination within normal limits. And per abdomen, when I examine, she has a fundal height of 22 weeks and FHS is heard.
Okay.
Then per speculum, her os is open with bloodstained discharge over the cervix with no active bleeding or leaking. PV is not done, and patient is taken up for emergency ultrasound scan as indicated, and it showed a single-live intrauterine fetus of 22 to 23 weeks gestation with variable presentation with U-shaped funneling of cervix with residual cervical length 1.5 centimeter. And patient's sister also gives similar history and had a preterm delivery at 24 weeks of gestation bystanders are now anxious, and what will you do next? How will you
Okay.
counsel the bystanders and the patient?
Okay. So what will you do, Ramya? Just tell me exactly, this is the scenario. What will you do for this patient? You said
So
she's
for
at 23 weeks of gestation. Okay.
yes, ma'am.
Everything is normal. She's got a heaviness in the lower abdomen, no, and mild blood stain discharge. And when you did a scan, it is a U-shaped. Always try to summarize in your mind. You understand? Once you
Yes,
see the
ma'am.
whole thing, take the positive. The 23-weeker is a positive sign. The second in important,
ma'am.
no other problems. And the third is that she's got a speculum mild blood stain discharge. And fourth is that you got an ultrasound positive finding of a U-shaped funneling of
U-shaped funneling.
but residual length is there. Okay, there's a little cervix length. What will you do now?
So
For
this
this
is an
patient,
ideal
your
candidate for rescue encirclage. That is McDonald's encirclage. We can be done for the patient.
1 minute, 1 minute. Ramya, I'll
Yes,
just
ma'am.
correct you.
Yes, ma'am.
Will you call this rescue amma or will you call it ultrasound indicated? This is an ultrasound indicated. A rescue is done for a physical examination indicated. When you put a speculum, do you think you will see the funneling here because there's a residual cervical length?
No, no, ma'am. No, ma'am. It is an ultrasound indicated.
There is a little
Yes, ma'am.
contradiction in what you're, maybe there's a slight patulous os, but the
Yes, ma'am.
membranes are not bulging, amma. Do you understand? Huh?
Okay.
Okay, okay.
So it
Now
is-
what? So what
she's an ideal she's an ideal candidate for circlage. So I'll do all the pre-op investigations and post the patient for cervical encirclage. And
Correct. That's all that you'll do. Plus, what else will you do for this patient?
I'll
She's a
also
20
give a shot of antenatal corticosteroids, although she is less than 24 weeks. After counseling the bystanders regarding the prognosis, we can give a single course of antenatal corticosteroids. And along with that, tocolytics can be given up to.
Normally, we give it after 24 weeks, 23 weeks,
Yes,
24
ma'am.
weeks, and less only after counseling. Why did you counsel them? Why?
Because it is a periviable period.
Yeah, it's a periviable period, and it is a very
Peri-
precious. She's married 4 years and investigated for infertility. You know, you said
Infertility.
that.
Yes, ma'am.
Treated
Yes,
for
ma'am.
infertility. So you're
Treated for
taking
infertility.
Okay, right, fine. Okay, then and then you put in a cerclage. Can you tell me a few
Sir.
steps for the cerclage which you will do for this patient? A few steps.
Okay, for the, after
One,
positioning the patient,
Only four steps.
after
four
positioning
points.
the patient, painting, I will
Yeah.
paint and drape the patient, and then I will go, I will catch the cervix with,
Before that, Ramya, good to give a
yes, ma'am.
tocolytic. Give a tocolytic.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. I have already said that. I will give
Okay.
a shot of tocolytics and take the patient for circlage. And in the operation theater, I will do, after painting and draping, I will do a perspeculum examination and confirm the findings. And I will proceed with McDonald's encirclage.
Give her a steep Trendelenburg position. Do you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
And
Steep
because
Trendelenburg.
position, and I'll just tell you one more thing. This is a U-shaped funneling of cervix. Even if you give a steep, if you give an IV tocolytic, and if you give a steep Trendelenburg also, sometimes U-shaped funneling, you may have to put in a Foley's. You may have to put in a Foley's bulb. You may not see it on the outside, but you may have to put it inside and then put the cerclage, then you get a good result. Others, you may pinch
Yes.
the membranes. You may pinch the
Yes.
membranes. Okay. And then,
Yes, ma'am.
but only one area of controversy, I may not give that steroids. That's the only thing. Okay. You may counsel
Okay.
and give it. That's your prerogative. But then I would not give it in this 23-weeker. I wouldn't be giving a steroids. Okay.
Madam,
Ramya.
Madam, a question from me.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure,
Why
sure.
why not corticosteroid?
No, that is each person's prerogative. After less than 24 weeks, you'll have to counsel them, and you can give it individualized based. So that's what I said. If you want to give it, but I wouldn't give
I
it.
have read somewhere that the alveoli are not formed before 24-25 weeks of the pregnancy. So even if you will give steroid, there is no alveoli to produce any surfactant. Is it something like that?
No, actually the same. There are two types of surfactant, lecithin and sphingomyelin. In the initial stages, they say that the ratio of sphingomyelin is more, 2:1. Sphingomyelin is more and lecithin is 1. Then 2:1. Then as time goes by, it becomes 1:1. And when the lungs attain maturity, it becomes lecithin is 2 and sphingomyelin is 1. So in the very early stages, but they do say, the American college does say that before 24 weeks, if you're giving it, counsel them and see, individualize the patient and then give it. But I would not give it, I said. That's my individual opinion. But she said she will give it, you give it, it doesn't matter. And if you're able to carry on the pregnancy to a future date, my only thing was that U-shaped funneling. I will give a tocolytic, I will give a steep Trendelenburg. I might put in a Foley's bulb from below and then push the membranes down a little, though I don't see it on the outside. And then I might put my McDonald's around it. Okay.
Just a word of caution, in sonography, we have to see the location of the placenta as there is a bleeding.
Correct, correct. Now,
Yes,
in this case, it is a mild blood stain. I heard Ramya say that she will look out at the
Yes,
central location. This mild blood stain, sir, as maybe because the cervix has started dilating. Maybe because of that, I feel. Because the mild blood stain discharge over the cervix, no active bleeding. And she said that you said in your history that the placenta was fundal, right?
Yeah, I didn't mention the placental location, ma'am, but it was
Okay.
normal location. It was fundal.
Okay. Fine, fine. But it's good to make sure about that also, as Dr. Sunil
Yes,
has
ma'am.
said. Okay.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
shall we go to the
Thank
next case? Yeah, thank you, Ramya.
Thank you.
Merin, you'll take this case, Merin?
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
Merin. Yeah, take this. Let's see what you can say.
Mrs. M, 32-year-old, gravida 2 para 1 living 1 with a previous history of preterm delivery at 29 weeks, now at 31 weeks of gestation. And she's also a known case of gestational diabetes mellitus on insulin and oral drugs, gestational hypertension on one antihypertensive. Now came with complaints of bleeding per vaginum and lower abdominal pain of 1 day duration. And her routine...
Stop, Merin, stop. See, I'd like to concise my history. So what has she got? History of one previous preterm birth at 29. Now she's 31. That's 1.1. She's a gestational diabetic. She's on insulin and OHA. That's fine. She's a gestational hypertension on one antihypertensive. Okay. And normal ultrasound. Okay, fine. Now tell us.
On examination, vitals, blood pressure was 160 by 100 millimeters of mercury, pulse rate 85 per minute, per abdomen 30 weeks, contractions plus, and head was high. Contractions plus, you should specifically tell how many contractions, it is not written here. Then per speculum, there is bleeding through the os, sufficient amount of bleeding through the os. And gentle pervaginal examination, a cervical digital examination was done, and it was soft cervix, which was 3 centimeter dilated and 2 centimeter long. It should be actually less than 1 centimeter long with membranes absent and head at -3.
Oh.
And fetal heart sounds heard. And an ultrasound which was done.
One minute. Try to comprehend slowly. So she's got a little high BP. Maybe you will step up her antihypertensive. Okay. She's got good contractions. She's effaced. She's, she's dilated. She's got 2 centimeters length cervix, and she's got no membranes. Okay. And she's got, you said she's got certain definite amount of bleeding. Right. Okay. Then what is the next thing you got to tell us? Yes.
So the ultrasound, it is a single live intrauterine fetus of 30 weeks in cephalic presentation, and AFI was 7 centimeters with estimated fetal weight of 1000 grams, and placenta is in normal position, upper segment, BPP good. What is the line of management?
Okay, now you tell us. Now I'll summarize for you to make it faster. Previous history is there, okay, of preterm labor. Now she is at 31 weeks. She's a hypertensive diabetic. Okay, she's got good contractions. She's effaced, membranes are absent, and she's in labor. And AFI is 7. What all will you do for this patient?
This is actually a case of established preterm labor with rupture of membranes and preeclampsia, and preeclampsia with features of abruption, probably, because there is severe.
One more thing. Instead of you saying preeclampsia, gestational hypertension would have been enough. Did you check her albumin? You do not check.
Oh, no, not checked. So severe gestation. Okay. With gestational hypertension with features of abruption.
Yes.
So, and gestational diabetes mellitus.
Okay.
So at first we have to hospitalize this patient. She is admitted in the labor room with a
Okay. Okay.
And 160 over 100. So you can give IV low in intravenous Lobet 20 milligrams can be given, and then okay, and probably the cause of preterm birth, it could be either a previous history of preterm birth or it could be a gestational hypertension, the raised BP that has caused.
1 minute, Merin. Already there is a history. Don't repeat it again.
Okay.
Now
Okay,
what
okay.
will you do? Can you
Okay.
conserve this pregnancy? Can you conserve? Can you
No,
conserve?
no, you cannot
this?
conserve the
We will
pregnancy.
not conserve. Why? Why? Tell me why. Tell me
Because
the,
one is she has severe hypertension with features of
that is
abruption.
not, no. That
Okay.
she's got
She
features of
has
abruption.
Abruption. Then the second is she's in preterm labor. That is,
Correct.
she has a rupture of membranes and she's in preterm labor.
that's correct. So what will you do? What will you do for
So
this?
first we can give her antenatal corticosteroids for the maturity. That is depending upon the gestational diabetes status. We have to do the GRBS and see if it is normal, and then insulin accordingly to be given. Then you should give her intravenous antibiotics are to be initiated because she doesn't know when she had a rupture of membrane. So for GBS as well as the chorioamnionitis, we should give her intravenous antibiotics to be administered.
Right, fine.
Then since we are planning planning delivery, we have
Very
to
good.
provide her with neuroprotective MAC-Self. Magnesium sulfate has to be given. Then before initiating antibiotics, we have to take a rectovaginal swab has to be taken to rule out the GBS for GBS culture.
Fine.
Okay.
Fine.
Then most important is a continuous CTG monitoring.
But I'll just tell you, Merin, one more thing. I would have taken a swab if I was going to conserve this pregnancy. Now, actually, I can just treat her. There's no time for the culture report to come. Okay,
ma'am.
now, what are you going to do now? Next,
and continuous CTG monitoring,
Very good.
To assess the status of the fetus.
Very good.
We have to think about induction, labor induction or augmentation to be done.
Yeah,
and
you'll have to
we have to
labor and
monitor with partogram. Monitoring has to be done.
Very good.
Then,
and NICU counseling?
Yeah, definitely. We should do an ICU counseling to be done. And then the delivery depends upon whether if we have a continuous CTG is definitely normal, we can proceed for a vaginal delivery. Unless CTG shows any complications or any complication, patient can be taken up for the cesarean section. And at the time of delivery, as ma'am had already mentioned, we should tell about the delivery. How is the delivery? Vaginal delivery. No forceps or no vacuum is to be used. Then cord milking of the cord has to be done. All other as regular as madam has told.
Very good. Very good, Merit. You did a very good job. Okay. Right.
Thank
you. So this we will not conserve. We are going to deliver this patient. So you augment labor and deliver her. Okay. We'll go to the next case. Okay. And Nejita, you would like to take this case? Nejita?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear?
Yeah. Can you see, Mala? Can you see the slides?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now read.
This is N, 33 years, G4, A3 at 16 weeks, first trimester abortions, now presented with complaints of lower abdominal pain for 2 weeks. It's not associated with the bleeding, no other symptoms. On examination, her vitals were stable. Per abdomen uterus correspond to 16 weeks and fetal heart sound was heard. Her speculum, cervical was visible and was closed. It's not done. On university examination from singular intrauterine fetus of 16 weeks of gestation and cervix was short with 20 millimeter length and was closed.
Okay.
Management of this patient. She's a case of bad obstetric history in 16 weeks of gestation and previous 3 were first trimester abortions came with abdominal pain. But USG found
1 minute. Nejita, you will say she's a case of recurrent pregnancy loss or recurrent miscarriages, right? Okay. And now she said 16 weeks and she's got pain. So what is this?
Pain and USG shown cervical length of 2 centimeters. So the management of this patient is ideal. USG indicator cervical encephalus has to put.
Excuse me, ma'am. Her voice is not clear. Dr. Nachita.
So what will you do, Nejita?
Yes, we should put an USG indicated encephalitis for this patient. Madam, am I audible?
Now it's okay. Why did you say ultrasound? Because you saw the short cervix.
Yeah, short cervix.
Okay.
And she has no previous history of second trimester losses. Only first trimester losses she had.
Okay.
So this is ultrasound indicated encephalitis should put for this patient. And also she came with complaints of lower abdominal pain. So we should rule out infection for this patient. Usually cervical and asymptomatic bacteriuria or urinary tract infections may have. So we should screen for these conditions and treat accordingly.
Okay.
Also, she said 16 weeks of gestation, we should start her vaginal progesterone for preventing preterm labor.
Okay, that's fine.
Maybe she is taking aspirin or low molecular weight heparin. It has to be continued.
Okay, fine. But I'll just tell you one more thing. Sometimes I've often thought, and I would like other people's input on this, after previous 3 losses, whether it is better for us to put in a cerclage for the next. Do you understand? Many times we have lost a pregnancy, the 4th one, going in for a cervical insufficiency. So because now see your patient has already got pain abdomen. Do you understand? So I'm not very sure. Yeah, it may be urinary tract infection, I agree, but maybe we could have probably put in a cerclage as a routine even slightly before this. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Nijita. Thank you.
Thank you.
Aishwarya, you're taking this?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Tell me. Read it out, Aishwarya. Friends, I must tell you, this questions. Yeah.
Gravida 2 para 1 living 1, DCDA twins at 26 weeks.
Okay.
Spontaneous conception, complaining of leaking PV for 3 hours and lower abdominal pain. On examination, uterus corresponding to 30 weeks over distended and contractions is 4 lasting for 30 to 35 seconds over 10 minutes and fetal heart sounds plus. And sterile speculum examination revealed clear Leica draining, and ultrasound showed DCDA twins with cervix 3 centimeters or closed and placenta funder posterior, DPP good, with F1 cephalic and AFI 9 centimeters, expected fetal weight 750 grams, and F2 breech AFI 10 centimeters, expected fetal weight 780 grams. How to manage?
Okay.
Now, after the initial assessment, we know this is a case of DCDA twins at 26 weeks. DCDA twins at 26 weeks with PPRIM and preterm labor pain. So we have to admit the patient and start her on antibiotics. According to ACOG, we have to give her IV ampicillin 2 grams with erythromycin 250 milligram Q6X for 48 hours, followed by oral amoxicillin plus erythromycin. Then we have to give her injection betasol 12 milligram 24 hours apart. Then we have to give magnesium sulfate for neuroprotection, that is 4 milligram IV bolus over 30 minutes, followed
1
by
minute. 1 minute. Can I just correct you, and Aishwarya? See, you're saying leaking. What is the most reassuring part in this scan? If I ask you one question, what is most reassuring in this ultrasound?
AFI.
Very good. AFI. So you said in one place she's leaking, and then you said clear. I don't think she was draining. She must have been leaking a little fluid. That's all. Do you understand? So if you are not anticipating delivery within the next 24 hours, you don't have to give magnesium sulfate. Do you understand?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and I would not have given her steroids. I would have seen first whether her contractions will stop with the nifedipine. If it doesn't abate, then maybe I know that she's going to deliver. Then only I'll give her steroids. If I'm going to conserve her, I will not give her. I might give her the antibiotics as you said, but I will not be giving her anything more. No tocolytics. Maybe I might give her. She's got some contractions. You say I'll give her tocolytics, and I think it is only a mild leak. It is not actually a ruptured membranes. And I may not give her steroids. I'll just wait and see. I may not give her magnesium sulfate. I might wait and see. But if she progresses, I'll give her both.
Okay.
You understand? But I would not mind, even if you give steroids, I mean, it doesn't really matter, 26 weeks, because you're being cautious, you require 48 hours. Okay, so that's also okay. Maybe what I'll withhold will be magnesium sulfate. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Right. So, and then we can continue the pregnancy for 10 days. We can give her the antibiotics and then subsequently watch out. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Aishwarya. Thank you.
Thank you.
Julia, you want to take this? I think this is the last question from our PGs.
Yes, I'll take it, ma'am.
Okay.
Julia, you can on the video. Your video is off in your mobile.
Post has received.
No problem. Otherwise, also you can read the question. No problem.
Mrs. J, 28-year-old, gravida to para-1 living one, now at 8 weeks, with history of preterm vaginal delivery at 30 weeks. She came for routine antenatal checkup. What can be done in this pregnancy?
What will you do?
Here, my patient has history of one preterm birth at 30 weeks, and now she is in early gestation. The risk of having a preterm birth for this pregnancy is 15 to 30%. And in order to prevent preterm birth in this pregnancy, first we can place a history-indicated cervical cerclage, and the ideal time would be between 14 and 16 weeks after the early anomaly scan. And there is also a role for vaginal progesterone, 200 milligram daily can be given.
Can I make a correction in that? See, with the
Yes,
history of a preterm vaginal delivery at 30 weeks, I would rather give her from 16 weeks onwards, I can give her progestrogens. And I will not place a cerclage until I see the cervical length. If the cervical length is normal, there is no place. You understand? A preterm labor with a shortened cervix only, there is a place to put in a cerclage. You got
Yes,
it,
ma'am.
Julia? So
Yes,
in this
ma'am.
patient, ideal would be when she reaches around 16 weeks, I might start monitoring her cervix. Do you understand? And then
Yes,
I
ma'am.
will start giving her progestrogens. I'll watch her cervix. And if her cervix at any time becomes short, then that's an indication for us to put a cerclage. Okay?
Yes, ma'am. And also, when she's more than 26 weeks, we should advise her not to have coitus, and also not more than 40 hours of work per week, no night work, and no heavy weight lifting.
Very good. Very good. Okay.
And also, since she's having previously she was having a spontaneous preterm birth, we should screen her for dental infections and asymptomatic bacteriuria.
Very good. Very good. Yes. And give her all the necessary precautions to keep away from work. Let her stop working. She can stay at home. She need not take bed rest, as you said, and abstain from heavy work. Okay. Very good, Julia. Very good. Right.
Thank you, ma'am.
Now, Ashwat, we are ready for your questions.
Okay. There are so many questions have come. Now all the panelists can switch on their videos. Okay. I will be asking questions to madam, and questions to you all. Anybody wants to answer, they can answer. Madam will answer. Any difference, you panelists can add to it. Okay. Without madam, it's a rapid fire because of the lack of time. Okay. Madam, your question time starts now. Okay.
Ashwat is making me very nervous. Huh? Yes, yes, Ashwat.
At till what gestation do you do expectant management in preterm labor? Till what gestation?
After she has crossed the 37 weeks, I will just allow her to deliver. I will take it as far as 37 weeks.
Okay.
I will not deliver.
Okay, next question. Ideal tocolysis after cervical cerclage. Ideal tocolysis.
As a routine, no tocolysis after tocolysis after cerclage. The only time when I told her was when there's a physical examination indicated, then we give an acute tocolysis to put
And
the
what
cerclage.
is the ideal tocolysis after an emergency cerclage? What is the ideal tocolytic?
It is only for the cerclage. After that, no tocolysis.
What is the drug they have asked?
Terbutaline.
After cerclage, will you continue tocolysis?
There are some people who even give indomethacin. Okay. But if you want to give one shot of tocolysis, you can give terbutaline. You can give indomethacin for 48 hours, no problems. But no continuing beyond 48 hours, only till.
Two questions on steroids. Any role for repeat dose of steroid, and any role for steroids after 37 weeks?
That's what. There is really no place for steroids after 37 weeks, only if you're going to give it to prevent the transient tachypnea of newborn, which we don't do. You understand? If a patient has not received a tocolysis between 34 and 37, you can give, but that is not for lung maturity, but it is only to prevent TTP.
What gestational age is considered to be viable fetus? The viability, when you're asked in the exams, they ask what is the age of viability in what is the age which you
Yeah. See, it is very important to remember that at 22 weeks, the chances of a live fetus is only 5%. 5%. You understand? So it very early 22, 23 is a period of the peri-viable period.
we have discussed dose of magnesium sulfate in neuroprotection. They are asking that can it be recommended for all preterm labor?
That's what, when you're expecting delivery within the next 24 hours. You got it. Steroids are given when you expect delivery within 1 week. But magnesium sulfate only if you're giving, we are expecting delivery within the next 24 hours.
About now questions on nifedipine. Nifedipine for preterm labor, is it what type? It's an SR tablet or and how long nifedipine can be used? Continued.
Very good. See, nifedipine, as when you give as an antihypertensive, we give the SR. But when that patient of hypertension is in labor, we change it to the regular. That is for hypertension. When you use it for nifedipine here, we can use an SR or you can use a regular, it doesn't really matter. But normally we give it for 48 to 72 hours. Max, if you want, 5 days. That's all. That is being practical. But really it's indicated only for 72 hours.
Okay. Can nifedipine be given along with magnesium sulfate neuroprotection together? Is there any caution you have to maintain?
Yeah, that's what I told you some time back. See, basically magnesium sulfate is also a calcium channel blocker. So both can cause a neuromuscular blockade and respiratory depression. So watch out. You must watch the respiratory rate if you're giving it, because we give it in eclampsia, right?
Next question. Bed rest and U-shaped funneling.
No road.
Yeah, that's what I told you already. No bed rest. Okay. Okay. If you can restrict physical activity, that is the word that you say. Stop her from going to work. Advice against coitus. All that you can give. What is the next question?
LSCS for less than 1 kg baby or 1 point. Is this necessary?
It doesn't matter. That's what I told you. The cesarean rate is inversely proportional to your gestational age. So the chances of a 34-weeker delivering vaginal is more, and the 29-weeker going for a cesarean is more. You understand? Because of the induction delivery interval will be more in the younger gestational age.
How to screen for GBS?
That's what. You can take a rectovaginal swab.
How to take rectal?
Yeah, you just, I told you, no? Take that and twirl it for 10 seconds. And then you can take it and send it for GBS culture.
What is the role of giving vitamin K along with beta-mesosone? Is there any role for?
No, but there is vitamin K is given only to reduce the hemorrhagic disease of the newborn. So in such a condition, you can give it, but it's not an indication to combine steroids with vitamin K, not as a routine.
And next question is, can dexamethasone, which is better, dexa or beta-methasone? Can dexamethasone is associated with periventricular leukomalacia in neonates?
Correct. See, that was one of the, just mute yours. See, the DEXA and beta, same status. But how the beta-methasone scores over is because beta-methasone is a time-tested drug. And it was noticed that dexamethasone can produce periventricular leukomalacia. Do you understand? But today they are downplaying that and they are saying that you can give dexamethasone. probably the DEXA gained its popularity in India when at a time we were having scarcity of betamethasone. That's when the DEXA started coming in. So now they are downplaying the periventricular locomalacia and they're saying it has got the same effect, but don't repeat the courses.
A patient is on Visalon for APLA syndrome or any immunological condition. She goes into preterm labor. Do they require steroids?
Yes. There's no
Patient is
No,
on.
mute yours. Yeah. Now, very important for you to remember, if the patient has been on steroids, Visalon, prednisolone, it is not equivalent to betamethasone. You will have to give it. Even if the patient has been on pregnancy throughout with prednisolone, you will have to give betamethasone when the time comes. Okay? Is that very clear? Yeah.
Okay. Now, what is the best test of choice for PROM to diagnose PROM? Aminosure, Actiprime, or Litmus?
No, you can do anything. Litmus and all that is only a bedside test.
Madam, you are muted. You are. Okay.
Yeah. See, please remember the two tests which we can use. You can use anything that you want. Sometimes you may not require anything. Just a speculum will tell you that she's ruptured MM. But only when we have got a suspect, then we can use, there are a lot in the market now. You can use them and see they're all actually the same principle of the nitrogen test. To check the alkalinity of the amniotic fluid, you can use that. Or if that is not available and you're in a poor setup, then you can actually be doing the Ferning. But the best definite indicator for me would be the amniotic fluid volume in the ultrasound. You can use anything you want. Speculum examination, a nitrogen test, or a Ferning test. But the best is ultrasound. Now Aishwarya told you in her case, AFI is dropped to 7. So that means she is certainly ruptured. She's seen evidence, physically evidence of ruptured leaking membranes. Plus, she has noticed AFI less. So definitely the Leica is less. That is the best indicator. Okay. So the only thing that you monitor when you're conserving that pregnancy is you check out for the AFI, serially for AFI, and see whether the patient during your expected management has got any evidence of chorioamnionitis. So check her pulse rate and check her leukocyte count and check out for any tenderness, foul smelling, discharge, etc. As you're conserving. Once she's reached 34 weeks, just deliver.
Okay. Dose of azithromycin in PPROM. Can we give azithromycin instead of erythromycin?
You can. I showed you that slide. If you don't want to give erythromycin, it's 250 QID, give it as azithromycin 1 gram.
Okay.
1 gram.
Next
That's
question. Injection progesterone after cerclage. How many injection progesterone after cerclage? Giving injection progesterone.
Yeah, I've told you already that injection progesterone evidence-based has said only in the history of a previous preterm labor we give it. So it need not be given as a routine after a cerclage. If you want to give so much something after a cerclage, you can give the vaginal progesterone, not injectables. It's not required. But if you have got a short cervix and a preterm labor, then I will do both. I will give injectables as well as cerclage. It's very clear, no? You can modify according to your situation, but this is all evidence-based.
Is there any role for measuring cervical length if the patient comes after 32 weeks? With preterm labor by ultrasound, measuring cervical length, is there any role?
There is no cutoff. There is no cutoff. The only cutoff we know is less than 24 weeks, 25 millimeters. After that, we can never say. It can be 3.5, it can be 4, it can be 4.2. Those are all the lengths. We cannot, there is no cutoff. For us to say it's a short cervix.
Membrane ruptured at term. Should we give erythromycin? Patient is term.
No. The erythromycin I told you some time back is actually for fetal protection. So you don't have to give erythromycin. You give a group B streptococcus ampicillin 2 grams and 1 gram 4th hourly.
Okay. Why cerclage is not useful in twins?
See, why we don't do a cerclage is, cerclage, they say, actually will increase incidence of in preterm labor if you put in a cerclage, okay? Because basically what happens in a multiple pregnancies, the uterus is becoming very big. So when you do most of the time when we have done a PV on a patient with multiple pregnancy, there'll always be certain amount of dilatation. That is the leverage for it to dilate and to accommodate the growing fetus. So just seeing a short cervix on multiple pregnancy is not an indication for a cerclage. But though we do see, supposing the patient has had a previous history of a preterm labor and it's a multiple pregnancy, then you will have to put in a by putting a cerclage on a multiple pregnancy. But if the patient has got an incompetent cervix as known by the previous history, then that's an indication for you to put in a cerclage for a multiple pregnancy.
Okay, as we have reached 4 o'clock and the time is up almost. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, madam. First of all, I have to thank Alpesh Gandhi sir for the idea behind it and executing it. And okay, thank you all. Thank you once again. Thank you, Dr. Sunil, Joint Secretary Foxy, for being there and telling his views. Then thank you all my PGs, actually PGs who prepared the cases and presented the scenarios. And without you all, there were more than 500 participants in this. Without participants, and thank you all for taking your valuable time. I know that you are all busy during this time with dealing with emergencies. Then also you took your time, and thanks all.
Dr. Aswati, your voice is not coming out.
Thank you all. Thank you once again. Thank you all. Thank you once again for the nice webinar. Thank you so much, everybody. Everybody, thank you so much once again. We will meet next month. Every month, last Tuesday will be the webinar, and we will get the invites. And those, tell all your any college PGs have not joined the group, please send their list of PG list to us. And I have sent from my personal email ID invitation to most of you, so you can send us. And thank you most probably the Alembic Pharma for initiating such an event, and all the people and the technical persons, Satish, who has done this excellent work with uninterrupted view. So thank you once again. Thank you all for an excellent webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Alpesh, Dr. Sunil, Dr. Ashwath, and all my PGs. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay, so I'll end the meeting now, sir.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. We'll end the